Imagine a ragged Victorian chimney sweep who'd eaten about as many hot meals in his life as a down-on-their-luck seagull. Now, imagine them being flung from the mouth of an illegally jaunty water slide into a pool already black with soot from the chimney brush that came clattering down before them. This is the only way to describe the fleet of the Interfactional Exploration Club, or whatever it was called, emerging from the hyperspace rift at the rim of the Trollempus star system. And he said to me, "Do you want to have a good time?" And I said, "Well, of course I do." And he had all these tickets coming out of a funny machine, so I reached down and grabbed, Lieutenant Olympus was saying before the light whiplash of switching reality plane knocked her out of her seat. No one else fared much better. "The inertial dampeners appear to have malfunctioned, Captain," Lieutenant Titanian told the man he was currently lying on top of. That man was Professor Dr. Pope Captain Detainee Noah Dahl Ryman. "I think they were probably sold for parts before we set foot aboard," Ryman said as he wiggled away. "And I do apologize, Lieutenant Olympus, for your consumer troubles, and I shall have you reimbursed the moment I can work out how to embezzle some cash from this operation." "Oh, thank you, Captain, but the payment that I promised was my organs when I died," Olympus explained. "Ah yes, perhaps that's the kind of trouble our good treasurer wanted to avoid. Now, I must say, it's time for us to do our jobs, whatever those might be." "You want me to ping?" Olympus smiled. "Yes, in a spacer-like and orderly fashion, if you would." "Ping!" At this, Olympus finally got off the floor and did the sort of poking at buttons on a machine you would expect of a professional science officer. Momentarily, a radar pulse illuminated the Trollempus system with sweet demi-material radiation. It's good for your skin, some say, if the main problem with your skin was that you'd look even better without it. The radar monitor was wild with returning pings from all directions. "Captain, there's either a dead bird in the radar dish, or we're absolutely surrounded by ships," Olympus reported. "Probability report," Ryman said. "In my experience, it's always been the bird. And would you mind stating your experience?" "Yes, I have a lot of experience. I used to sit on the bridge of my father's ship when I was a child." "And how long ago was that exactly?" "Oh, it was when he worked for the Persians, years ago, I don't even remember. Anyway, now he's in charge of Volturn." "What?" "What?" "Your father is the Admiral?" "Yes, wonderful, isn't he?" "Yes. So let's call it no experience and move on. Wait, so that means..." The thing that meant burst in through the bridge doors behind Ryman with narratively convenient timing. "Ooh ah ah!" the intervening man proclaimed. "Rah!" Olympus pinged back. It was either a case of hyperspace-induced genetic devolution, or these two knew each other. Ryman was clever enough to know these weren't mutually exclusive. "You've met Ra, haven't you? This is the captain," Olympus beamed. "Pleased to meet you, the captain," Ra said, with an offered handshake. A small arm extended from Ryman's belt and performed the handshake for him, while his real arms snatched the name tag from Ra's purple spacesuit. Too late note, he was wearing a spacesuit because of his job, as you'll soon appreciate. "You're Ra Olympus, son of Admiral Olympus, Commandant of Volturn, and presiding chairman of Parole Committee 385B, Ryman demanded to know, despite knowing it already. "But my friends call me the Skimmer," Ra winked. "Wanna know why?" "He has no friends, ignore him," Allison winked even harder. "Oh Ra, there's a bird in the radar dish." "I'll forget that, there's something even better, Captain. We're surrounded by ships," Ra proudly reported. "How do you know that? Can you read the radar screen? Do you want a promotion to officer?" Ryman probed, unsure if replacing Allison with male Allison would be an improvement. "Man, look out the freaking window. I came here to get your permission to go out there. There's all kinds of stuff floating around the hyperhole," Ra said. 2 notes here. The bridge didn't have any windows, and a hyperhole was the point in a star system where the lost civilization of the past had left a gap for ships to leave reality. While you may find the term used in many other contexts throughout the Perseus sector, remember that it's an official term with a very real and non-humorous application. There's a 3rd note too. Ra was already an officer. In fact, he was Chief Logistics Officer, on account of his vast experience of having once successfully opened a tin of cyberfish for a cyber cat, and even more on account of being the Admiral's useless son. The only thing holding him back from being on the bridge was that he didn't read his emails, so he didn't actually know he was permitted to leave the muck and filth of the lower decks. But that wasn't really Ra's style anyway. In fact, he was only on the bridge now so he could get into the even muckier, even filthier decks of some of the hundreds of derelict ships gently orbiting Trollempus in a lonely huddle. The Gargandua was right in the middle of it all, like a hamster immersed in a bed of steel straw and sun-fried circuitry. Ryman finally had some work to do, that being to tell someone else to go do the work. Ra Olympus rounded up a few spacefaring types from the crew and took them all out through the vacuum to start prowling the scrapyard. Remember, anything that might have cash value, Ryman reminded him amid the search. Lieutenant Contreras is waiting in the cargo bay to appraise and tag all finds. For science or whatever. This last remark was added in response to Allison glaring at him. "You're giving Ra bad habits. You know he has a problem with the S word," she said. Lieutenant Olympus, Call me Allison. We should be friends." "Oh, yes. I am the captain, but what's the S word?" Ryman babbled as he crept into his chair in defeat. "Stealing," Allison whispered. Titanian, napping upright by the door, stirred like a hungry dog. "We're not stealing, we're salvaging," Ryman said. To be fair, taking things you find in space was perfectly legal, in the same fashion that any crime you don't get caught for isn't really a crime. It says that in the constitution of at least 2 of the governments ruling the Perseus sector. Anyway, Allison nodded along, saying salvaging to herself, as if testing the taste of it. "And your brother's a thief, is he?" Ryman eventually asked. "No, not really. I mean, he was arrested when he worked for Hegemony on contract, but only because he was taking fuel from the torpedoes. He's so clever. He wanted to climb inside and shoot himself really fast. Oh, I'll tell you about it another time. It's too much oxygen to explain now." "Contreras is in the cargo hold. You don't have to watch your breath at the moment." "Yes, but she made me promise." "When did she get to you then?" "Oh, before we left. In bed last night." "What?" "She came in to tell me to stop snoring so inefficiently." "Right. Sorry, I misunderstood." "It wasn't a sex party." "Roger that." "And my brother's not a thief."
"Captain!"
Ra's voice cut in.
"You wouldn't believe how much stuff we've stolen."
"I'll believe it when I see the cash, Lieutenant. Bring it all in," Ryman ordered, waving red-faced Allison away.
"Something's not right, sir. Nothing special in these wrecks. The ships aren't really that old. A couple of classic models from 100 years back or so. Rest of the standard lot you'd see any time after the first AI war."
"So you're saying these ships were dumped here after the system was destroyed?"
"Without a doubt, Cap. Pirates, I reckon."
"All the way out here?"
"Don't put it past the pirates, sir. Everything that ain't ours is theirs, eh? Goes for space as much as anything else."
"Titanian, risk assessment?" Ryman asked. The only reply was a gentle, economically viable snore. "Roger that." Ryman nodded to himself in continuing defeat. "Well, Mr. Olympus, thank you for your work. You've earned your pay today, and mine."
"One more thing, Captain. There are ships from Galatia here."
Ra reported. This caught Ryman's attention. If you recall, Galatia was a university of sorts that he had spent most of his working life lowering the graduation rates at. "Any tour shuttles? Reg number FX3845, he almost begged.
Not really. I mean, they got shot up pretty bad. These aren't the usual pirate gattlers, though. More like energy weapons, the older kind. I've got a bad feeling about this, Captain."
"You know what? I think we should do our job. Let's double-check this whole system. If we get out of this debris field, the demi-radar might even do something. There used to be a colony in this system. It'll be a bugger to calculate the navigation, but then there's bugger else to do in a graveyard."
"Aside from the grave robbing,"
Ra pointed out. "Goes without saying, Lieutenant. You're an asset to the mission, and your parole officer."
"Thanks, Captain."
Ryman threw off his headset as his last straw snapped, brushed himself down, and retired to his quarters. He was at such liberty to do so because travelling to a planet in a solar system takes a few days, whereas the 40 light-year journey from Volturn to the Trollempus hyperhull was a mere 10 minutes. Hyperspace. That's the explanation. I should add that about a month of real time passed during that 10 minutes. Hyperspace travel was a great way to rack up salary payments, and an equally great way to make a long suspended sentence get served quickly. Ryman was gaming the system in every way, scrunching up the letter of the law as thoroughly as the Gargandua's antimatter engine did to space-time. Let's hope no one grabs that ball of space-time and throws it in the trash, eh? Oh ho ho, let's get back to the story. For several off-duty days, the Gargandua and its fleet of hangers-on gracefully fell into the orbit of Trolempus, with a belly full of defurbished ship components and personal effects of long-dead crews. It was considered bad luck to loot the quarters of the dead, but it was simple economics that not doing so invited even worse luck. And if you disagree, Lieutenant Contreras will come for you in the night and explain it with a cheaply worded bedside whisper. Perhaps you'll see the true value in so-called salvaging once our heroes reach their destination, Kardesh. It was the only planet left in the sector that hadn't been explosively demoted to asteroid belt. What remained was this planet of sand. Being a desert planet wasn't just a sci-fi trope anymore. The rigors of post-collapse wars involved turning so much of civilization to dust, and indeed ruining so many terraforming projects, that planets purged of life were to be expected. But everyone already knew such places existed in the outer sector. The IEC was here to see if these places could still be saved. Laughable, I know, Kardesh certainly couldn't be saved. Salvaged, though? Well, that's worth a quick look and a flick of the tongue over the lips without a doubt. What, at a glance, appeared to be a devastated world, suffocated by sand and losing its magnetic field bit by bit each year, turned out to actually be a devastated world suffocated by sand and losing its magnetic field bit by bit each year, with a small metal protrusion sticking out of the sand at one point. It was the remains of an orbital habitat, one that left much to be desired with both of the qualities for which it was named. It was faintly emitting radiation, and boasted a structure that threatened to collapse at any moment. In other words, it was a safer place to be than the Gargandua, so down most of the crew went to take a look inside. I'll explain the details of this process later, since we'll be seeing a lot of it. In this case, there wasn't much to see, as most of this once orbiting city was now crushed beneath the encroaching dunes. Lieutenants Ra and Contreras got to work on the buildings and infrastructure yet to be weathered away, recovering many wondrous space-age machines. Remember, the space age was in the past for all intents and purposes, to be clear. Strange blue curved things, strange pyramidal purple things, and some things so strange, so differently coloured, and so irregular in shape that even in the depths of all science fiction literature you'll find no words of imagination that can describe them. Could probably flog it for a few bob on a sunny day at the flea market, so in the cargo hold it went. Indeed, the day-to-day technology used by people before the collapse was remarkably poorly understood, primarily because actually possessing anything like it was tantamount to inviting the same destruction the sector had undergone. I can't explain now, but some people in this modern age were what we might call Luddites, and in their defense, there really was a recent apocalypse linked to all these machines. But in many ways, that meant the black market value of a 300-year-old dehumidifier was as sky-high as the apartment it was salvaged from once was. A cloud with so much silver lining it fell out of the sky and crashed in a horrible disaster with hundreds of thousands of casualties. But hey, the silver's still pretty neat. And if you think that's an unfair way of looking at it, you've come to the wrong sector. Now, all this sanctified burglary has yet to reveal why I'm even telling you this story at all, so let's change that up and get this show back on the road to the infamous grand scheme of things. Of all the misc mugged, only one item was brought before Ryman on the bridge. It was a disturbingly new data core. Think of it as a hard drive. It was encrypted beyond any use, but for a single header file that first and foremost requested the core be delivered to Provost Calicor of a certain Galatia Academy. Calicor, Ryman muttered murderously. Dead, Titanian grunted, losing interest immediately and returning to his napping post. Yes, dead, and had it been sooner he wouldn't have spent half his career calling my research ill-founded, Ryman said. Yes, it sounds tame, but jibes like that put a curse on you in the marble halls. He's been up to no good out here. A smile burrowed out of Ryman's mouth. Wait, all those students who were quitting because they couldn't hack the Provost's harsh expectations. Quitting and never being seen again? Did you see any skeletons down there? Sand's not kind to skeletons, Titanian grunted again. He doesn't always grunt, he was just tired today. It says these people were researching AI. But why here? Allison noted. A place where AI killed everyone, and that way we're here too, Ra answered. He was talking about the AI wars, and I'll tell you about those later on if you're very well behaved. Asking why we're here is not only above our pay grade, it's beyond the knowledge of AI and God alike, Ryman said. He was scanning through the file. It had definitely been several Galatian-trained surveyors who wrote it 5 years ago. They deployed in secret to look for evidence of the program of censorious castellans. If you think that name is annoying, don't study at Galatia. What was the POCC? That was for Provost Calicor to know, and he was extremely dead. Then its value should be determined by deconstruction and appraisal of constituent parts. Contreras cut in upon this point. No, we're keeping this, Ryman said. I need this more than you can ever imagine. Finally a conspiracy that isn't against me. Contreras gave him a look that indicated she was going to deconstruct and appraise the parts of something today, man or machine. It was a very flirty look. Ryman stood firm, whether he would be able to sleep safely that night or not. He deactivated the core and plonked it on his lap once he was back in the captain's chair. Calicor wouldn't have risked this if there wasn't something big going on. Trust me, he didn't let anyone off the station for anything less than a triple funeral, preferably one being your own. He was studying the AI and the claps. He must have had something so good he couldn't tell anyone. So good he ended up dead. What was it? Autoerotic asphyxiation. That's bullshit. You can't die from that, Titanian quickly claimed. After some expectant silence, all were forced to continue with only their own imagination for a citation. So yeah, whatever we were looking for, it's this. And the cash. Can't go wrong with cash. Ryman's eyes widened as if staring into a gleaming pile of gold. Let's go get the cash for all that junk first. Shouldn't we check to see if the students who used this core are still alive down there? Allison suggested. More expectant silence. Cash, Ryman mumbled, and hark, the game was afoot. The market was crying out for hundreds of tons of extremely used spare parts and vacuum-fresh knickknacks. Crying just slightly louder than Ryman's science mystery called for answers, and far, far louder than any so-called survivors called for rescue down in the sinking ruins of lost civilization. And if you disagree with that particular priority system, again I must inform you that you have come to the wrong sector. A flurry of pulsing engines kicked the Gargandua and company back towards the hyperhall, and a few days later they popped through the boundary of reality into hyperspace. If you want to know what hyperspace was like, it's simple. It's blue and there are lots of clouds. No, you protest, you're thinking of the ocean, like on Earth. Nope, hyperspace is like that too. An ocean of stars, of infinite possibilities. And like the real ocean, most of the possibilities are along the lines of being lost forever, crushed to death, or at the very least consigned to some kind of locker. The latter being a roughly accurate description of the accommodation provided for the nameless enlisted crew. There is another striking similarity with the real ocean that reared its ugly mast less than a minute into the journey back to the core worlds. Unidentified contact in the hyperclouds, Allison reported. Resolve it, Ryman ordered. He wanted Allison to focus the scanners to see if they picked up a transponder code, but Allison didn't know that. However, she pressed various buttons convincingly, and as it happens, there was no transponder code to be found. That's because pirates don't transpond for anyone. It's coming right at us. Oh, ruddy luddy, they're pinging us really hard, Allison exclaimed with aggressive relish. Titanian, Ryman called. Lieutenant Titanian came to look at the scans. They've got us roasted, he concluded. We'll be in that pile we robbed soon enough. I did warn you, Captain. Did you? Yeah. I might have been dreaming it. Titanian trailed off. He went away now, but the problem remained. I think they'll be here in 10 seconds. Are we all going to die? Allison calmly asked. Before Ryman could answer, Contreras burst in through the bridge doors. Pirates are about to engage us in mortal combat, she said. How do you know that? Ryman demanded. Windows? Bloody windows! He exploded. It had become a sensitive issue, somehow. Contreras carried on. I shall negotiate a price for our surrender, and minimize the amount of crew who are enslaved or jettisoned. They didn't leave survivors from whoever else came looting here. You really think you can talk them out of killing us all? Ryman asked. Contreras nodded. Of course I can. Don't you trust me, Captain? Her voice had pitched upwards, and her eyes had widened, and in the harsh strip lighting of the sweaty bridge, it looked as if she was about to shed a tear. Lieutenant, Ryman breathed through cringing features. Absolutely not. With this, he sprang into action. His captain's chair was flanked by all manner of controls, which his fingers fell upon with expert dexterity. The gizmos and computers he wore all over his head began to flash in response to his mental commands. He activated the intercom. Calling all ships, calling all crew, this is your captain speaking. Please strap in and hold on tight because I'm about to pull some absolute nonsense right out of my arse. Enjoy the rest of your flight. He smacked a button on the console right behind him, and gravity went out the window. If there had been a window. Sorry for bringing this up again. It's a pain to clean, you know. He was steering the ship this way and that, hardly caring if the other ships were following correctly, and mumbling through all kinds of wild calculations happening on his many monitors. Captain, what category of solution are we to expect your arse to produce? Contreras said, or her voice said, as the woman herself was floating about the bridge, frozen in time. Hyperspace stuff. My speciality, Lieutenant, hyperspace topography, Ryman practically growled. I was never any good at it, according to Calicor and his committees, but it just so happens that I'm the only one who knows how to really do it. I believe this clearly fallacious statement and trust in you completely, the voice said, in an I'm making a point sort of way. The Gargandua and its hangers-on were now cruising wildly around the invisible contours of hyperspace, with the pirates in hot pursuit. There were at least 20 aggressively triangular ships in the pack, all painted red and glowing before the artificially widened plumes of their antimatter drives. How good they must have felt about their chances. And yet, had they received a PhD in hyperspatial topography? No. Had Ryman? Depends on what you mean by received. There's no time for that now. We're intersecting with reality, Allison reported, in a voice that sounded like she was 3 years old. She may have been having one of those reverse death experiences. Reality. Always hated the place, Ryman quipped, cool as a cucumber experiencing a rapid matter-antimatter annihilation event. Boom. Whoosh! The ships soared through the sentimental blue of the hypercosmos, riding secret waves and slipstreaming through mathematically ill-founded currents. By the time gravity, entropy, and similar such qualities of day-to-day life had been restored, the IEC fleet was drifting right into the bit of hyperspace corresponding to the core worlds of Perseus, with not a single pirate to be seen. As I said, only I know the real methods, Ryman boasted to a room of extremely sick and mentally battered adorers. I checked the data over and over, but those idiots upstairs insisted I had to be wrong. Nope. Hyperspace isn't its own space, it's a two-sided mirror, a reflection of multiple... Oh. Ryman fell to the ground because hyperspace was also a place where the electricity running the human body doesn't work if you get too frisky. What does that even mean? The Galatia Academy can tell you that they don't know in over 200,000 words. The good news is that the ship did have a basic autopilot. Hence, only a few minutes later, the Gargandua and its entire company of support ships were tumbling into the Ashkonia star system in a messy superposition of alive and well. That's really the best you can get for a trip to space at the tail end of human civilization, so huzzah. Of course, our crew had actually got even more than this nothing I am celebrating so irreverently. They returned having not only done something that might be called completing their first mission, but they had sled loads of saleable salvage and a sachet of scientific secrets. Some messy superposition of all these achievements was about to make the IEC substantially more legitimate. And that's going to make Ryman's nebulous PhD substantially more crucial to the fate of mankind. How? Now there's a question the Academy has 200,000 words for. Let's see if I can do it faster.